Hello and welcome back, and that is right, today we're talking about the Changwang. What a terrible name, by the way. I am not mature enough to say that.
Thank goodness he's drawn attention away from my shirt.
This is the CWWK AMD-7840HS. Catchy name, right? And this, I would say, is one of the most exciting MITx boards we've had here in the studio for a very long time. I think it would be fair to say that we've been taking something of a plunge into the world of DIY here on the channel with regards to network attached storage for the better part of 8 or 9 months. DIY Friday, me and Eddie call it in the background. We try our best every Friday to put out a video on the subject of DIY NAS. And I tell you right now, after a few weeks ago, we did a whole video based on recommended MITx boards that we thought were pretty good, and then you guys did a follow-up video on ones that you thought were even better. This was quite a contentious little board, because it is one of the very few MITx boards out there that is not only AMD, but it's AMD and a promise of ECC to a point. And today we are going to be unboxing this. We're going to be taking a good old long look at the specifications. We're going to boot it up, take a good look at BIOS, but we're not going to be doing the testing in today's video. We're not going to be deep diving beyond that point. The reason being, we don't have all of the components. We don't have some of the SFF cabling required for this, and we're going to be utilizing some specific media for this. I'll be talking about that for the course of this video, but this serves as an early kind of look at this. I'm not going to call it a review, but I'm certainly going to go down the road of exploring just what is included with this little board here. So, available now at about $423 right now, officially on CWWK's site. You can also get it with a CPU cooler for $437. It's listed in a few different retailers there online with regards to Aliexpress and a few other Eastern ones. And much like when we talked about the N300 board, when we were talking about that Newton Erjing board, the i9 there, the 12th and 13th gen boards there, this is getting very hard to find. And what we're going to do now is see what exactly we get for our money. We went for the heatsink equipped version there. And again, this is arriving with the Ryzen 7 kind of SoC system on chip controller. And again, we'll go with that. We've got some foam. Again, we went for the one that's got the little fan. So if you get the model that's got the fan, they throw in a Jonsbo half height fan there. Lovely little compact model there. And again, we will be occasionally flicking to the backup camera here on the side of the screen. So we'll be flickering there back and forth for the close-ups. But also alongside this, with that kit, remember you're spending 430 odd nickel here. We've got that heat cooling kit there, the CPU cooling kit there. You're not going to get that if you don't spend the extra few quid. We got our instruction manual. Shockingly, it is the standard Jonsbo, big old bit of paper there, going through all of what you need to know about setting that up. We've also got the CWWK instruction manual there. I say instruction manual, it's to do with the warranty, and the whole thing is in traditional Chinese. Not very helpful. On top of that, we've got our screws for mounting the board into a motherboard, into a PC casing there. We've also got our port plane there for the rear. Put that there. And of course, we've got the board. So there's nothing more in the box. Get rid of that. Get rid of all the bits we do not need. We'll need that CPU cooler for later on. So let's take a good look at this board. So there, what do we see? We see a tidy little mobile. I will say that middle panel there definitely looks like it could have been a little slicker. There's quite a few little marks there. I'm not sure why that looks like that. Not a tremendous fan of that. But I will say, in terms of hardware architecture, this is actually pretty darn good for what you're getting there. So if we start off talking about that CPU there, and I'm going to keep that there on screen for you. So first up, let's dig into the specifications of that CPU there. The CPU there is an 8-core 16-thread processor with a baseline clock speed of 3.8 gigahertz that can be burst when needed up to 5.1 gigahertz with a TDP of between 35 and 54 watts. Now, in terms of integrated graphics, it arrives with a Radeon 780M graphics that at burst can go up to 2.7 gigahertz, which is a pretty high performance number for integrated graphics. That has to be said. This is a Zen 4 Phoenix CPU there, so again, we're seeing a lot of the modern stuff there in terms of Gen architecture. To the Gen 4 at 20 lanes to spread across the system. So, you know, comparable to that of some of the Intel cores that we talked about recently. How does that translate across the rest of the system? Well, in terms of memory, we can see that it supports DDR5 memory, and that DDR5 memory, apparently, there is support of ECC. Now, I'm not going to fully commit to that because there is definitely contentious opinion surrounding that memory there at the top, because that memory there is, although it is ECC memory, the slot there is discussion about whether the CPU inside this, that 7840HS, actually supports it, because we know that the 7735 CPU in the AMD family there supports ECC. And although DDR5 has got that on-die ECC, we talked about it in other videos, thank you very much again for the comments, I'm still going to wait until I've got this up and running with some ECC memory inside those slots, just to double check that that CPU actually supports it and can utilize it, because otherwise you're going to be overspending on memory with the extra, you know, little checksum flash module on board that is just, you're not going to be getting the most out of. Now, alongside that memory, what can we also see here on the board? Well, down here we've got these two lovely little SFF ports there. Those are SFF 8643 fan out connectors there, and there's also an additional SATA there based on the bottom, which means this is a potential 9 SATA board. 9 SATA connections possible on this via the 2 fan out cables. Now, the fan out cables are not included. We've already ordered them in. That is one of the components we're still waiting on. I wanted to put this video out rather than you guys wait for the complete build on this one. But that does mean we're looking at 8 to 9 bay. Now, you might be thinking, oh great, I can put a SATA SSD inside this. That might be the dullest thing I've ever heard, because yes, thanks to this being Gen 4 architecture, both the top-mounted M2 NVMe connector there and the base M2 NVMe connector are Gen 4 architecture. Gen 4 architecture, which means, again, we're looking at some lovely little speeds at 2,000 megabytes per second, potentially through every lane. They are Gen 4 times 2. However, whether that is for heat or just because they've had to stretch it out so far, we'll have to see. Now, in terms of that PCIe connector here, you may be rejoicing that it is a times 16 slot. Well, it looks like it's a times 16 slot physically, but it's a times 8 slot actually, which is a bit of a pain. It's still Gen 4 times 8, which is still some lovely bandwidth and opens the door to potential bifurcation, utilizing particularly, you know, splitter cards, that sort of thing. But still, nonetheless, it's nice that you've got the physical support of those cards, but I'm surprised they didn't just go with a cutout if they're just going to be utilizing that as it is. Now, I will also highlight there on the rear, we got some interesting ports to discuss, haven't we? Because what you may also have noticed there is 4 Ethernet ports. We got ourselves 4 2.5 gig Ethernet ports there to play with. You can tell my plastered finger there from taking my cat to the vets. On the side of that, we've also got some nice USB connectivity, Type A and Type C. Again, I'm sure on screen we've already listed a lot of those specifications there. And of course, a combination DisplayPort and HDMI, because this is the integrated graphics board there. It's a nice little layout, a clean layout of components there. And although we've known about this board already with regards to a lot of those mini PCs that are floating around, you know, those PFSense ready router boxes there, it's still nice that we can actually get the board and start rolling out our own custom DIY NAS build with a board like this. I will also highlight quite neatly, if you were looking at a Jonsbo build, this thing is frigging great, because notwithstanding that it is obviously compatible in terms of being MITx and SFX PSU ready, it is the fact that when you're looking at, say, the Jonsbo N3 and 8-bay box, you have got already, you've solved that whole multi-SATA port fiasco that you tend to get with MITx boards. Overall, I'm really looking forward to getting this inside the Jonsbo, at the very least, getting this in our test bed. And actually, on that subject, And there we go, that is our motherboard installed inside the Ugly Betty here. Now, alongside the motherboard, we've installed a few extra components there. So obviously we've attached this Jonsbo CPU cooler there inside. That's the one that you get if you buy it as a bundle from most places. And again, right now at the time of recording, this video should go out tomorrow. This is already starting to be relisted under TopTon and a few other brands as well, all on Aliexpress. So there's lots of different variants, or at least variant brands you can get this for alongside different configurations of memory, and NVMe's included with it. I will say with NVMe's, we are using a Seagate Ironwolf 525, that's a Gen 4x4 drive, but I will say, remember, this motherboard is utilising Gen 4x2 slots, so we will be digging in to both the BIOS and UnRAID and terminal to find out just exactly what's going on with those downgraded slots. Now, in terms of memory, I've gone ahead and installed 32 gig of DDR5 memory there. Now, I do not have ECC memory currently available. We're either going to be getting some crucial memory, sorry, I meant Micron memory is the one that we're getting there. Alongside that, we're not utilising the PCIe slot at this time, because even if we did put a card inside this, we don't currently have the storage cage and array ready to start doing some performance testing inside UnRAID there, but we will double check that that is, at least in BIOS, down to be an active slot there, whether it's time 8 or time 16. And that's really it. Network connectivity, we're just going to go ahead with a single network connection there just to make sure they're all visible on there. And I'll be honest, this has been put together in a little bit of a hurry for you guys for this video to go out in the next 24 hours. So again, some of this is going to need to be tweaked. I'm pretty sure one of the fans is the wrong way round, but for now, let's get this connected up. And then from there, we've already got UnRAID ready to go on a USB stick. We'll get that inside there. Network, of course, get that plugged into one of those ports there. And finally, the power, making sure, of course, that you've got your PSU switched off at the switch. And of course, why don't we get this up and running now and make our way over to the test machine and start digging into these BIOS. So now in the BIOS, I'd say that the kind of options available to us here for an AMD board are fairly standard. It's a little, underwhelming compared with that of, say, the Ying we had on the channel a few weeks ago. But still, the thing I really wanted to find out is more confirmation about that memory. Yes, we're not using ECC memory, but I was hoping there'd be some indication about support on the CPU+Mobo combo. Unfortunately, there isn't anything really immediately to hand. We will be dipping into UnRAID very shortly and jumping into terminal to find out more about it. But when we go for the configuration there, for example, the NVMe, if we go into the NVMe configuration there is that Seagate Gen 4x4 drive in there, utilising the Phison E16 controller. We'll be doing a bit of a bench test for read and write on that as well, but at least it's recognised straight away out the gate. And also want to get confirmation about whether this device is Gen 4x2 on those slots. But again, we'll find out more about that when we go through UnRAID. Moving forward from there, I'd say the CPU configuration and the hardware monitoring, the system's been on now for about 15-20 minutes as I started connecting some of the ports there, and the temperature's not too shabby. The fans are kicking in nicely there, but this is an open box configuration for the Mobo there, so it isn't really indicative of those of you that would put this inside a tight case. Again, when it comes to the PCIe layout there, we'll find out more about the PCIe layout when we dip into UnRAID there and going via the terminal. All of the ports seem to be configured in at 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, which is exactly what we were hoping to see. And if we go via some of the options and configurations along the top, we can find out a little bit more information about that CPU. So in other words, the base speed, the clock speed, and ultimately what we can reach with it. I will say straight there with the max speed at 3800 megahertz there. Given this CPU is advertised in numerous locations as being a 5.1 gigahertz boost on this, I'm hoping that's just me not looking in the right area, but still nonetheless, I just wanted to highlight that as I was going through it. Now, going through it, most of the PCIe stuff, as you might expect, is all fairly straightforward. This is a Gen 4x8 slot, but a physical times 16 slot, you're not able to take advantage of that. But what I think is interesting, and something I want to dip into later on about those M2s, have they been downgraded down to times 2 on a software level, or is that something that's locked in on the CPU level? So that's something we'll be looking into later on with UnRAID as well. But overall, the BIOS here, although it's not exactly exciting, I will say at least there is the configuration options that we'd like to see. So what I'll do now is I'll hop straight into booting in from UnRAID. So let's go straight into UnRAID with our USB boot and make our way in. So now that UnRAID has finished booting, we can come out of that there and make our way into the user interface here of UnRAID. Again, we've got a breakdown on the left-hand side. Let's big that up a little bit. A breakdown there of the kind of hardware information. And as discussed already, we've got that 32 gig of memory that is a non-ECC stick inside. We've got the Micron hopefully arriving sometime next week alongside those individual SAS fan-out, those SFF cables there that are going to allow us to do some RAID testing. But interestingly, if we make our way into the terminal and take a little look at that memory, we're able to see that this detailed list here from the SM BIOS does detail error correcting code type as none. Now, we know that the SODIMM module we put inside isn't ECC memory. We didn't have any in time for this video. But when we make our way into the specs, we do know that that CPU, at least according to Tech Power Up and a few other sources, does indeed support ECC memory. So again, the jury is still out until we've got that 32 gig module arriving with us to do those ECC checks, whether this is going to be a CPU barrier, a MOBO barrier, or even neither, and we're going to be able to take advantage of it. But more on that later on when we retest this rig. Now, a hop, skip and a jump along within UnRAID. What we can also do is take a little look at the system devices there just to make sure that everything is being picked up. And indeed, there are our lovely little threads and the entire layout of all of the components inside. Let's use the scroll functionality. So pretty much everything, all the way down to a breakdown of those AS media individual controllers there to manage all of those extra SATA drives. We've installed that Seagate drive as well. As you can see, that's a Gen 4x4 drive. And ultimately, everything's kind of laid out the way I'd like to see it. Don't worry, we'll head back into the terminal in a moment, but it's just nice to know that we've still got access to pretty much all of the ports and connectivity here, and I'd like to know whether we also have access to that Thunderbolt connectivity there. It looks like at least the controller is being picked up between them, and I'm quite pleased with what I'm seeing, at least in terms of the layout and now allocation of those lanes. But let's dig in just a little bit further there. We head into terminal and use LSPCI. We're able to break into it there and see that same breakdown that we can see in UnRAID. But if we go ahead and just break that down just a wee bit more, we can find out a lot more about the layout of the components inside this system. And now, some of the things I want to look at immediately for a start is to know that we are definitely using 2.5 gig ports, and it does look likely to be the case. We're seeing that breaking down across the whole spectrum there. But what I'm really interested in is knowing just what's going on with those M.2s, because when we closely examine the board already, and I go into my photos I took of it, we're able to see that both of those PCIe slots, as you can see there, are 4x2. So I want to know whether these indeed are Gen 4x2 slots, and as we break down into it, we can see they are 16 there times 4, but they have been downgraded, as you can see there, down to that ×2. So at the very least, you can see that a conscious effort has been made to bring that down, again, whether that's lanes or temperature. But still, nonetheless, at least that is true that they are at the very least Gen 4, even if they are downgraded to Gen 4x2. Carrying on with that storage there, Gen 4x2 should allow around about 4,000 megabytes per second of bandwidth to play with. So let's do a cache-less write test first, and we'll have a little look. We'll do a read test afterwards. And again, we're already seeing quite good saturation there. I'd say for a Gen 4x2 drive, that's not too shabby, particularly given this is a Seagate Firecuda Ironwall 525, which only has a maximum Gen 4x4 speed of around 5 to 5,500 there. So having it on ×2, I'm still pretty impressed with what we're seeing there. And moving forward onto some read testing there, let's copy in the same code there. We're able to see that in terms of read testing, we're obviously going to see a slightly increased number. And again, we are using a cache-less test, but that's still pretty good numbers for a Gen 4x2 drive, cracking that 3 gigabytes per second consistently in read, and in write hitting highs of 2.8, so 2,800 megabytes per second. Again, we'll work out the mathematics of 1,000 versus 1,024, but still nonetheless, this is still telling me some great numbers for the PCIe and M.2 layout here so far. But that's really about it. I wanted to get this video out on Friday the 1st before the end of the week, so next week we could get to the nitty gritty and just kind of share what we're doing at the moment. For those that are watching the channel, it's worth highlighting that next week we will also be talking about this. This is UGreen's NAS here. This is going to be that Kickstarter NAS they're talking about. We've got that. This is the 4-bay flash version, and that UGreen DXP 4800 Plus. That's going to be next week as well. Hopefully that's going to be in time for DIY Friday. And of course, something else we're working on fake moody NAS SSDs. Look forward to talking about these later on. But stay tuned, I'm going to wrap this up real quick. Thanks a lot for watching. Stay tuned for the next part on this particular Mobo. Overall, I'm happy with everything I've seen so far, but until we get a nice storage cage of drives in there, the jury is still out on this. But thank you so much for watching. There'll be an updated guide linked below over on NASCompares. Most of that will be covered, and we'll be updating that regularly over the course of the next 2 weeks as we do more and more with this setup and this board here. But apart from that, have yourselves a fantastic weekend, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.